On behalf of the Mannkal team and our chairman, Ron Manners, I welcome you to Emerging Leaders 2023. Before we get started, please be aware of the emergency exits. We have 2 on this side of the room and the 4 doors on this side. We expect our formal proceedings to last just under an hour. So if you would like to sit down, please make use of the seats at the front of the room. We also have a few chairs along the sides. If you'd like to top up your drink, have no fear. Drink service is continuing at the back of the bar, at the back of the room, and drink service will continue until 8:30 p.m. It's fantastic that we are able to host this evening here at the UWA Club in a relaxed atmosphere where we can all mingle and enjoy each other's company without worrying about masks and jumping up and down from table seating and all the other onerous requirements we had to consider last year. We are so proud to have once again produced a thoroughly successful scholarship program in 2022, and you'll hear more about that soon from our Programs Director, Kate Wagstaff. Despite the ups, we also experienced some lows, including juggling COVID masks in the office during our first few student seminars, and travelling scholars catching COVID while on the road. Later in December, we experienced a real tragedy, losing one of our brightest young scholars, Neve Loader, who passed away following a medical procedure. We are honoured to have her parents, Tina and Malcolm, here with us this evening, who will be accepting her award in her absence. Despite this tragic loss, we come together this evening in a spirit of celebration. Another group of eager students have completed our program, some of them embarking on internships both domestically and overseas. It has been wonderful to facilitate their ability to cross borders and expand their horizons outside of the comforts of home. This evening, we are very excited also to be sharing with you Senator Jacinta Price's inspiring message to our scholars on leadership and courage. Jacinta planned to be here in person, but her parliamentary schedule had other plans. Let's now hear from Jacinta.
To you, Senator. Warmest greetings to you, Senator Jacinta Nanprajita Price. Now, Jacinta, you have met many of our fantastic Mannkal scholars at the various Friedman conferences, but it's so good to have this opportunity for you to speak directly to them today. And we've had some fabulous speaking stars over the years for this event, but nobody has created the level of interest such as you have to this evening. So let me start off by asking you some questions, because I think the questions I'd like to ask you is about leadership, because I feel that leadership is sadly lacking in the political sphere and in the business sphere, and linking with leadership is courage. I'd like to sort of touch on the word courage and what one needs, what courage you need to actually say what you believe in rather than wait to see what the opinions of others are to form your own opinions. You resolving things from very first principles. So could I ask you to give us some introductory comments, and then just after that I'll come back and continue the questions. So Jacinta, over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ron. I think you know the world that we live in today requires people to toe the line of political correctness, and it seems to have influenced people on all levels. And certainly, you know, there are those that are concerned about their positions and the threat on their positions if they don't toe the line of political correctness. But if we all actually stood our ground and said, no, we need to actually be honest, we need to be able to have open, honest, fair debate without tearing each other down. The more of us that did that, the less opportunity that those who peddle political correctness would have to try to shut us down. I think for me personally, I've got a lot to lose in terms of the people that I represent are very vulnerable people who have been voiceless for a long time, and which is probably the reason why I decided to go down the path of putting my hand up for election in the federal Senate. It's why my mother chose to do what she did, to become a Minister of the Crown in the former Giles government in the Northern Territory, because it was understanding what goes on the ground, but without that actually being articulated where it needed to be articulated, where laws are created and where those laws and those decisions impact all Australians, but particularly those most vulnerable Australians. And I think you have to start from a place of honesty if you actually want to resolve some of those issues. And for me and my family, we it's a matter of saving lives. That's what it is. I think as a nation, I think we're quite a comfortable nation. We're one of the leading nations in the world, and we're very, very privileged. And I think that's what sort of lent itself to this idea of, well, many of us are quite privileged, and we should therefore listen to the voices that have been, I guess, pushing guilt politics on us as a country. And if we feel privileged, it's not our place to try to argue those, but that's what democracy is about. It's about drawing a line in the sand and taking a position, an honest position. And I think, and I feel like fear is what controls a lot of leaders these days. Fear of, whatever repercussions they might imagine that they might be confronted with if they're actually being honest. It shouldn't be about a popularity contest, really. It shouldn't be about, ensuring that everybody loves you, because ultimately, I think no leader globally has ever been extremely popular, where they could make decisions and go ahead and, please everybody. It's certainly not what it's about. The understanding that you are not going to please everybody is what you have to come to terms with. It's certainly what I've come to terms with over the years, and I think Australians in general are just are looking for that. They're looking for people who are real, I guess.
Fantastic, Jacinta. You actually speak for a lot of people. A lot of Australians feel that they're not represented at all at the moment. So that's fantastic. I had a long involvement in successful Aboriginal partnerships in farming at Esperance and in mineral exploration around Kalgoorlie. And during those times, I've witnessed many government policies that actually achieve exactly the opposite to their original intent. And I'm just wondering if that's your experience throughout Australia and particularly in the Northern Territory.
Yeah, absolutely. From very far back, I mean, there's this notion, I think, that we have the highest rates of incarceration amongst Indigenous Australians, and there's an argument that Aboriginal people have been locked up ever since colonisation, and it's just been worse ever since. And this is not in fact true. In the early 1900s, while Aboriginal people were sort of pushed into missions and taken off their lands, which was very unfortunate, but it happened historically. And there were those who were incarcerated for things like, spearing cattle. While there were levels of incarceration of Indigenous people around that time, at the beginning of the 1900s, this began to change. It began to lower. By 1905, there was in Queensland in particular, those percentages began to lower to around I think it was 5% for Indigenous men incarcerated in Queensland, and by 1915 there were no Aboriginal women incarcerated, and so these rates decreased historically and during that time because a lot of Aboriginal people were beginning to become part of the workforce. They were working as stockmen and women. They were taking on jobs and taking on those sorts of roles, and I guess understanding transitioning into a different way of life. But it wasn't until the equal pay decision was passed, which with good intentions, of course. The equal pay decision was passed, but the outcome of that meant that a lot of Aboriginal people, particularly in the Northern Territory, lost their jobs because station owners couldn't afford to pay them, the equal wage. And then that was coupled with welfare and access to alcohol. And that is when we began to see our levels of incarceration increase dramatically from there and be maintained all this time. So, the equal pay decision was a decision made out of good intentions, but hasn't been, it's created terrible consequences. Another is obviously, while it was wonderful to have our land back and land rights in places like the Northern Territory, we're land rich and dirt poor. So, while it's communally owned, there's not the opportunity for economic development. So Aboriginal people live on their land, have that, the whole spiritual connection thing and the romanticism of culture. It's wonderful to, have that, but we should be able to have the opportunity to create economic development opportunities, to be the job creators in our communities, and that hasn't occurred yet. There are a lot of well-intended sort of policies out there which have had really dire consequences. Another one is the fact that states and territories have followed the lead in terms of what the outcomes of the stolen generation have recommended, that Aboriginal kids are treated differently to all other Australian kids. So if they're in a dysfunctional situation, pretty much the priority is for them to be connected to culture and country. And again, that's that romanticism. But you can't have those meaningful connections if your family is completely and utterly dysfunctional. And we have big families, and keeping children connected to some kin further on in the family doesn't necessarily remove them from the dysfunction. So what we should be doing is putting kids in homes and with families, regardless of their cultural heritage or their race, should be putting them in homes that can meet their needs, that can uphold their human rights, that can love and care for them. But that's not what the focus is with the way the kinship policy works and the directives that have been handed down as a result of the stolen generation. And it's a completely different set of circumstances now than what it was previously. So there's a lot of policy across the board that's been well intended, but this had dire consequences.
Okay. Now, Jacinta, I'm a great believer in the Australian Constitution, because I see the Constitution as protecting us citizens from rapacious governments. And could this voice constitutional amendment that's being proposed be yet another example of good intentions that could easily go astray?
It's one of those on steroids, in fact. The problem with the voice is the fact that there's so many governance structures that are failing within the Indigenous industry. We have land councils, we have corporations, we have raft of different organisations that their governance structures aren't working. As it stands, there are 999 corporations as of the last estimates that haven't met their reporting requirements for the last 2 financial years, and the governance structures within them are clearly obviously failing. But these are organisations that are funded to probably predominantly overcome disadvantage for Indigenous Australians. So if all that mess sits underneath this overarching bureaucracy, how can anything anything positive come of it? I had a conversation recently with somebody about the fact that even in structures like the land councils here in the Northern Territory, ultimately you have an executive. Some of the members of the executive are in fact illiterate. In traditional terms, Aboriginal people, when it comes to decision making, will often follow the status quo. They won't want to speak out against something because speaking out against an issue can very much lead to violence, and so they'll avoid confrontation and sit there and nod in agreement, which, you know, for a lot of vulnerable Indigenous Australians whose first language is not English, who haven't had a great education, who are still connected to the traditional cultural way of doing things, they can very much be influenced and manipulated, and we see it a lot. We see it a lot in a lot of these governance structures. And you know, it occurs across the board, and I see this voice model as providing the opportunity to do exactly that. I mean, we need to audit and review the structures that already exist to understand where the successes are and support those successes, but do away with failure if they can't be you know, reinstated appropriately, and there's often no accountability, no real accountability. So things don't change in that regard. And now the proponents of the voice are seeking to establish a whole entire overarching bureaucracy on top of the mess that already exists, and that is very, very dangerous as far as I'm concerned. We need to clean up our mess before we even go anywhere near something like this.
Thank you, Jacinta. I think you've answered a lot of our questions on that one. Now, if I could move back to our central theme of leadership, I sense that Australians are hungry for a leadership that will focus on policies that will bring us all together as one nation, rather than pursue these race-based constitutional amendments. Now, let me bring it to a conclusion by asking for your suggestions of such policies that we can all move. We've got a fabulous country. We've got to get it moving again. So please.
Look, absolutely, and I think a lot of the demise of Indigenous Australia and the inability to close the gap has been because there's been a primary focus on our race as opposed to our needs. And while, you know, Indigenous Australians, some Indigenous Australians are amongst our most vulnerable Australians, not all Aboriginal people are disadvantaged. You're not automatically disadvantaged because you're an Aboriginal person in this country. There's some really successful Aboriginal people, and I'm one of those examples, I guess. And I didn't need a voice to get to where I got to. And many others who were successful as well didn't need a voice to get to where they got to. So our focus should be about serving Australian people on the basis of need. And I believe that'll bring Australians together. You know, I mean, eventually what I think we should aim for is the need for there not to be an Indigenous Affairs Minister, for there not to be all these organisations that exist primarily for the focus on Indigenous Australians. Ultimately, we all just want to be Australians as one. And the idea of reconciliation, I think, has been weaponised against non-Indigenous Australians to suggest, well, this is how high you must jump for reconciliation to occur. And as far as I'm concerned, reconciliation is about people coming to the table together and putting something on the table to offer to everybody sitting at that table. And I feel like that's the direction we need to go. We need to certainly have some pride in our country. We're one of the greatest countries on the face of the earth, and we don't celebrate it enough. Many Australians have been convinced that self-flagellation is how we must conduct ourselves, as opposed to recognising how wonderful is our nation? How wonderful is it that there are those from other parts of war-torn nations that want to come here and make this their home? We've got to see what it is they see in our nation, and recognise that we've all contributed to it. Everybody, we have a shared Australian culture that each and every one of us has contributed to, that each and every one of us, our ancestors, have contributed to, and we should be very proud of that. And they're the sorts of conversations we need to start having and speaking in those terms. That's how we bring about, a country where we feel like we're one and we're together again.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jacinta. And on behalf of us, all of us here tonight, we thank you sincerely, and I look forward to our next meeting somewhere around the capital cities. Thank you, Jacinta, once again.
What an inspiring message of leadership from Senator Price, a very courageous woman. Please now welcome to the stage our Programs Director, Kate Wagstaff.
Thank you, Nicola. Good evening, everybody. And for those who didn't get the memo, yes, apparently there is a Mannkal staff uniform now with our forest green. We planned everything, just not that. Okay, it's always my pleasure to stand up here for my favourite part of the evening, where we get to focus on the most important part of our program, which is, of course, our scholars. So 2022 was a year of regrouping for Mannkal as we readapted our program to suit the post-COVID world, along with the rest of the globe. So there was always the prospect of another outbreak and new restrictions hovering over our heads. So we were quite conservative when we put our activities for the program together. So we carefully selected a very small group of very special individuals to join us for the year-long program, and we focused very closely on the foundational pillars of what makes a free society. Over the course of the year, the scholars participated in seminars covering topics ranging from rule of law, intellectual conviction, revolutionary ideologies, and of course, Austrian economics. They also attended workshops with our friends at the Centre of Entrepreneurial Research and Innovation, or CERI in Netherlands, thank you, Toby, and received some professional coaching from Critical Components in Fremantle, thank you, Kira. Our wonderful Mannkal ambassadors, many of whom are here tonight, have been instrumental in the development of our scholars during the year. We hosted a mentor matching evening early on in the year, and many of our ambassadors and scholars have developed enduring mentee-mentor relationships. One scholar has even, upon Mankkal's recommendation and endorsement, secured an internship at Durack Financial with our Mannkal ambassador, Ronald. I'm not sure where you are, but thank you very much. Thank you, Ronald. And congratulations to Rowan. Where's Rowan? Well done, Rowan. So we were delighted to be able to send our scholars interstate for the first time in 2 years. First of all, to the Liberty and Society Conference held by the CIS in Sydney, and then to the Samuel Griffith Society on Constitutional Law, also in Sydney. And then we were able to send a large group of scholars, including our current 2022 scholars and some previous scholars from the COVID years who could not travel interstate during their scholarship with us. We were able to send them all together to Sydney to attend the Friedman Conference in July. So that was fantastic. And finally, at the end of the year, we were able to send some of our hardworking scholars on internships with our host partners around the globe. So some went to Melbourne, some went to New Zealand, some went to London, and some went to the US. We've also been able to re-establish our own internal Mannkal intern program, where we invite Mannkal alumni to come and do some work with us in the office for a couple of months. So this internship program is a really valuable experience for our alumni. It means that they can further develop their professional skills or undertake some meaningful research, of course, while beefing up their resumes. And of course, it's a great opportunity for those students who really feel that they want to give back in some way to Mannkal in recognition of the opportunities that they have received. So we welcomed 3 alumni as interns into our office. They're all here tonight. We have Lloyd, Sebastian and Wesley. So thank you, gentlemen. Really enjoyed having you in the office with us. And Wesley also had the honour of being published in Quadrant magazine for his article on the housing crisis and the free market. So congratulations, Wesley. Yeah, I think so too. Where are you, Wesley? Oh, is it hiding in the back? Okay. Oh, and next week we're going to welcome our first soon-to-be alumnus from 2022 into our office, Jake, who's running around with a camera. Hi. Oh, you put the camera down. Well done. So we're looking forward to having you, Jake. So for 2023, we are cautiously making plans for a slightly more substantial program. We're currently in the process of re-establishing connections with our partners around the world who have already hosted our Mannkal interns in the past. And we are very optimistic that we'll be able to offer more internships in more destinations for our hardworking scholars at the end of this year. It's already been a very busy year for our 2023 program, and it's great to see most of our new scholars here tonight. Thank you for coming. Next year, it's going to be all about you on this evening, and I promise you that this year is going to go so fast that you won't even believe it, and then it'll be you up here. So now we're going to hear from one of our 2022 scholars who's just recently returned from London, where he did a Mannkal internship with the Institute of Economic Affairs. Please welcome Sam Cruikshank.
So, hi everyone, I'm Sam. I was one of the 2022 Mannkal scholars, and I've just returned from an internship at the Institute of Economic Affairs in London a couple of weeks ago, so just getting over the jet lag. So I just wanted to talk about, what my favorite thing was at the IEA, what the lessons were that I learned over the last year with Mannkal, and then finally just a bit of advice for, the next generation of scholars. So I think my favorite thing that I had about the IEA was definitely the environment and the people. And what I mean by that was that it felt like a place where freedom of speech and freedom of expression was truly implemented. You could literally talk about anything and have an open and honest and frank debate where it was only about your argument. There was no don't mention this, don't mention that. Everything was up for debate, and that was constantly the case. There would be people talking about Brexit in the hallway, or talking about the war in the coffee room, or the housing crisis in the lunchroom or something. It was just constantly happening. And it happened with the interns as well, who were really diverse. They were from all over the world. Some of them were, American Democrats. Some of them were from Armenia. Some of them were from, the UK, and obviously us from Australia. So we all had a really mixed view, but it was just constant ongoing debate, and also just a lot of laughs and everything. And you also got to see some pretty interesting faces. I know Liz Truss came in twice. Jacob Rees-Mogg also came in. So obviously my conversations with them were about as brief as "can I take your coat?" But still, I thought it was pretty cool. But I think the best one actually was Joe Hockey came in. And when he entered the building, I think he recognized that myself and Jake McCall had Australian accents. And he thought, I'm going to have an interview. Why don't you guys come up and sit in on it? So we got to sit in with Joe Hockey, who's, for those who don't know, the former treasurer. And, to be sitting there with Joe Hockey, even just as an intern, and having him talk about fiscal policy, and even asking me and Jake to, give our opinions on some stuff, was really amazing to be part of that conversation. So I think that was definitely my favorite thing about being at the IEA. And I was really prepared for that because of all the valuable lessons that I've learned at Mannkal. And I reckon there's so many things that I learned, through all the seminars and everything like that, but probably the most important was just learning to really throw yourself out there into the unknown, make yourself feel uncomfortable, really find those opportunities that are everywhere around you, and really take advantage of them when you can, like put in the hard work. We were very quickly thrown into the Mannkal Ambassador round robin, where we essentially were going to choose our mentors. And there was so many, highly distinguished, incredibly interesting Mannkal ambassadors there, but we really quickly, within I think it was a couple of minutes for each, had to, make our case. Who are we? Why are we here? What do we want to achieve? And that was something that I'd never really done before. But Mannkal kept putting me in that position where I had to throw myself out there and just, meet new people, try and advertise myself a bit. And that was probably the most important thing that I learned, because that's a lesson that's just going to stick with me now. It's made me change the the way that I see interactions with people and how I see even events and things like that. So I think that really ties into what my advice for the future scholars are. It would just be, you need to go out and find all these opportunities that Mannkal is throwing at you. So go to every seminar, ask loads of questions, apply for every conference because they're amazing. I love the Liberty and Society conference, and Friedman was like libertarian Disneyland, so you definitely have to go. And the internships as well. The internships are just incredible. So apply for everything, but you will have to put in the work. Put in the work, try and improve on yourself. Everyone here is more than happy to help you. Everyone just wants to see you succeed. So you really just have to take advantage of that. Go out, talk to new people. If you find yourself at an event having, the same comfortable conversations with the people that you know, well, then you're probably doing it wrong. Throw yourself out, meet someone new, and just really get out there. Go into the unknown. That was probably the most important thing that I learned. So that's that. And I think to make an example of that, so I got back from the Institute of Economic Affairs. I was there for about 3 months. And after a couple of weeks of being there, I just knew that I absolutely adored the place. I loved everything that they do as an organization. I love what people are talking about all the time. So I just knew that I had to get involved in some way. I told that to the head intern. I said, look, I love this place. I love what you guys do. I'm a passionate libertarian or classical liberal, and I just want to get involved. Can you help me do that? And after a big conversation with him, he essentially said, my advice is make sure that everyone in this building hears the same speech. Just make sure that everyone knows that you're looking to get involved and you will make progress. So for the next few weeks, that's all I did. Just kept talking with everyone and having those conversations with them. And eventually I was outside having sharing a couple bottles of wine with one of the heads of the departments, talking about, freedom of speech and liberalism in Iran and all these kind of interesting topics. And she was just like, you've got the bug. I can see you got the passion. Give me till August and I'll get you a job. And it was a lot quicker. She offered me a job the next day. So, so now I have to move back to London in a few weeks. So this stuff really does, when you start looking for it, it just throws itself at you, and you just have to really be ready to take it on and try and keep up. Because once you start getting out there, there's so many opportunities and it's just amazing. So that would be my advice. Take it seriously, because I got similar advice at the beginning and it really, really helped me. So yeah, that's from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. It's so interesting to actually hear from a scholar who's been out there and done that and taken on all the advice that they receive at Mannkal. And as I say to our new scholars every year, things really, really can happen with Mannkal, and Sam is living proof of that. So rather than having me yap on anymore, let's hear from another Mannkal scholar. It's James Walker, who is an alumnus of Mannkal. He joined us in 2017 and he was a star performer from day one, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his Mannkal story. So that's it from me. Thank you, James. Will you please welcome James to the stage?
Thanks, Kate. And Sam, it's really great to hear what you've been up to. I can probably tear up half my speech now and save the minutes based on what you said. It sounds exactly the same. So first of all, welcome scholars past and present, and to the parents as well. Half this work is your work, and you've done brilliantly to get, particularly in the world we have today, to get the your kids as far as they've come. And as Sam said, there's just tons of opportunities. And then also thank you to any kind of Mannkal advocates, donors, all guests. It's incredible what Mannkal is, and it's just a privilege to be a part of it. And we all feel so lucky to be able to be on the receiving end of what is an incredible program. And then Ron, to you, I mean, for me personally, but I'm sure from everyone in the room, just a massive thank you. I definitely wouldn't have the opportunities in my career and in my life that I've got without you. So heartfelt thanks from me and also from everyone else. And it's incredible. I'll dive into my Mannkal story now, and just how fortunate I've been to be a part of Mannkal and what the program's done for me. First of all, I've done a fair bit of thinking when I was asked to do this speech, kind of what I think Mannkal is and how to summarise what it gives people. And I think the best way I can do it is this. So young people often want to go and challenge the status quo. They want to run really hard and fast at the world, and that's amazing. They should always try and do that. Except I'm sure everyone who's probably older than maybe 21 in this room can obviously agree with. Young people need a hell of a lot of context and probably a lot more information and experience and everything before they try and really go and do that. Often, at least, and I think in terms of the skills and the experience and just the interactions that Mannkal provides, Mannkal really bridges that gap and really just, in the essence, pure essence of it, just unlocks people's potential. So that's how I describe what Mannkal does. As Kate said, I was a Mannkal scholar back in 2017. Really, I wanted to move into banking and finance. That was my kind of my passion, and my current career now is I kind of started in banking over in Sydney in 2019 and quickly moved into funds management and investment. And, my current role is kind of working in an area of finance called private credit, which is essentially lending to companies and writing the loans that the banks, no longer write. And, in terms of the Mannkal experience that I got, learning about regulation, learning about, where the government kind of gets in the road or does things that, sound like they're meant to help you out and they do the total opposite. I went into a Big Four bank and was trying to write loans for middle market corporates. All these loans kind of support jobs or provide opportunities for new jobs to be built and just for the country to be better. And we just couldn't get these things away. Credit says no. There's all these kind of regulations that stop you. I found myself getting pulled away weeks at a time just doing data analysis for APRA. So I left the kind of big banking world into this, small funds management world, which is growing very quickly. And we're writing loans for middle market corporates that, we track kind of job KPIs and things like that, and all these kind of net benefits to the economy. And it's really a fantastic example of where there's little to no regulation, but we're not doing anything wrong. All we do is go out and, write new business and basically help people out. And, I probably wouldn't have identified the opportunity to make that move without the lens that Mannkal's provided me in terms of being able to look at the world, look at the economy, and then, just really dive in and try and make opportunities into a real thing. So, essentially where my Mannkal journey began, was I was obviously looking to get into finance, very passionate about investing, and I had a mentor of mine who had been a pretty successful businessman at one point in time, and everything that he would kind of tell me about the economy, big economic buff, he seemed to get it right. He seemed to say, ASX 200, you should be here, and go up there, and I was just fascinated by how right this guy always was. And he said, look, mate, you need to go study the School of Austrian Economics. Because, I know that your uni's not teaching it. I know that, economics is a bit lost in the way that, university teaches it nowadays. And I was just, lucky the stars aligned. I had a mate at uni who had gone through Mannkal, and I said, well, there's a place where you can go and learn this. And, I just took that opportunity as soon as I could, having seen what my mentor was able to do with this knowledge. And, basically, went into the Mannkal program, applied for it, went through the interviews, and as Sam kind of said, like the Mannkal seminars and the workshops and the speakers and interacting with Ron and it's everything from the pure kind of content stuff all the way through to actually teaching you kind of just behavioural skills as to how to operate in a corporate environment, how to handle yourself, how to communicate, how to dress, how to act, and like it or not. A lot of young people haven't come from an environment where, corporate interactions are kind of common, right? So it really is just a full service kind of program. And, it's really the groundwork of the likes of Kate and the fantastic team that Mannkal has. And, there's a lot of energy about the place in terms of just, if you get things right, you can take advantage of opportunities. The opportunities are out there. And moving on to, the opportunities that I had, my first kind of part of my scholarship was to attend a Mont Pelerin Society conference in Seoul in Korea in 2017 when Trump was threatening to, what do you call him? Called him Rocket Man at the time. So there was a bit of bit going on. Brexit had just happened. Rocket Man was at large, and I headed over to Seoul for the Mont Pelerin Society, and it was absolutely incredible. I mean, this was, for context, the Mont Pelerin Society is it was set up by F.A. Hayek, I think 1947, and it's a group of kind of economics thought leaders, business leaders, politicians, and a lot of really highly credentialed people. And I kind of walked in there as a kid who wanted to learn more about, hedge funds and investing and banking, and we had hedge fund managers and CEOs around every corner, and I think the chairman of JP Morgan Chase was there, and we had the president of the South Korean government at the time. I think he got elected out the next week, but he showed his face at the opening dinner, so that was just incredible. And it's fantastic seeing the TikToks and the content that the scholars bring back into our lives when we see what they're up to. And I was doing the same with photos and then writing up kind of sending Kate information about how I'm going, and for all the nicely worded stuff. When I got home and saw Mum, and Mum was like, "Oh, how'd you go? How was it?" I said, all I could say was, "Mum, it's just nuts." So that was the first major kind of opening up to the broader world, because these people come from everywhere. They're coming from the States, coming from Europe, and being in Seoul, a lot of people from Asia as well. And Ron's been brilliant in kind of supporting me to become a member of the Mont Pelerin Society myself, which has been an ambition ever since I attended that conference. And just another example of where if you really kind of work for it, you can really open up opportunities and turn them into really even better opportunities, and just amazing facets of your life. And after the MPS conference, I went to the Centre for Policy Studies, which is just down the road from the IEA where Sam was, and just another example of a development learning period for me. I was just thrust into, it was either incredibly deep research, it was a very kind of research intensive culture, but something I really kind of didn't know that I'd thrive in, but I did really well in diving into things like the UK's housing affordability crisis, and things like, at the time, Brexit had just kind of gone through, and looking at fiscal budgets across the European Union, and basically the big nightmare that is. But it was incredibly interesting, and just I'm sure everyone who's done a Mannkal scholarships felt the same. You get thrust into these deep into the content. It's not just nice learning. You have to produce stuff. You have to show that you've digested the material and you've done the learning. And the other, I guess, great perk from that was attending the Centre for Policy Studies Margaret Thatcher conference. Margaret Thatcher and Sir Keith Joseph were the two people who founded that think tank. And Henry Kissinger was speaking there, and then there were members of the Saudi royal family, and just again another experience where I just had to kind of adapt to the to the people who were around me, and it was nice in helping arrange that conference, be able to be told, "Oh, no, go sit down, go watch Henry Kissinger speak," and similar to Sam again, I sit down and I realise there's kind of Jacob Rees-Mogg is 4 seats down. I'm like, oh, awesome! Like this, it just keeps going, and I'll wrap up my remarks now, but I'd say just maybe one for the parents. But when I graduated year 12, my parents were asked to kind of present me with something from my childhood, something meaningful and something that can celebrate the graduation. My parents presented to me the book by Dr. Seuss, which was "Oh, the Places You'll Go," and I think that that had incredible foresight, because they must have known that I'd find Ron and find Mannkal, because it's really has been an incredible journey. And as Sam says, the opportunities and the level of optimism that Ron, you in particular, provide, being around you, the energy is infectious. It's and we need way more of that, particularly in the younger generation today, particularly after the last kind of 3 years that we've been through. So once again, thank you to everyone, and thank you for listening to me, and thank you, Ron, and thank you to the Mannkal guys. Thanks.
Thank you, James. What a glowing endorsement. It's now time to graduate our 2022 scholars. They've all adapted remarkably well to our high expectations of them, which should serve them well as they progress forward into their careers. I will now call on our 2022 scholars to the stage one by one to receive their graduation certificates from Kate. So please welcome Frances Ann. Sam Cruikshank. I will mention Luke Derrick, who is graduating as well. He cannot be with us as he now has full-time employment in the Northern Territory, which is great news. Charles Huggins. Larissa Giacono. Now, this is not Larissa. Larissa is still on her internship at the American Institute of Economic Research, so her father, Frank, is accepting her certificate tonight. Thank you, Frank. Sam Jones. Rowan Kihau. Rob Lachlan. Jake McCool. And Sophie Scott. I now invite Neve Loder's parents, Tina and Malcolm, to come up and accept Neve's completion certificate.
I'd just like to take the opportunity to say a sincere thanks to Ron, Jenny, all of the Mannkal team for giving our daughter such a fantastic last year of her life. It gave her such opportunities that she couldn't have found on her own. She got to meet really her tribe, people who were like-minded. I had never heard of Mannkal before Neve got the scholarship, and I never heard much else after she got the scholarship because it became her whole life. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for that, and thank you to the friends she made during that journey.
Thank you.
During her Mannkal scholarship, Neve revealed a gift for writing and had several pieces published in The Spectator Australia and on our own Mannkal blog. She had a gift for a pithy phrase that summed up her opinions she was always keen to share. Following Neve's tragic passing, we have established a new award dedicated to her memory, the Neve Finneran Loder Prize for Writing. Each year, we will be selecting the best piece of published writing by our current cohort of scholars. Future winners will be awarded a scholarship to travel to Sydney and have lunch with Spectator Australia editor and Sky News host Rowan Dean, with the first prize to be awarded in 2024 at our next Emerging Leaders event. In this way, we hope to honour Neve's memory while inspiring our young scholars to engage in public discourse. We also hope the establishment of this prize, acknowledging Neve's talent and impact on our Mannkal community, will give Neve's parents, Tina and Malcolm, some small comfort in the years to come. This year, we have 2 Mannkal alumni who completed summer internships along with our 2022 scholars, and we would also like to acknowledge their achievement. First up, we have Nathan Cuthbertson, who has just completed an internship at the Institute of Public Affairs in Melbourne. and Lloyd Hotinsky, who has completed an internship at the New Zealand Taxpayers Union. At this juncture, we can announce that Nathan Cuthbertson is now studying a Master's Bioresearch degree at Notre Dame University under a Mannkal Scholarship. Nathan will be supervised by Dr. Michael Harbour and Dr. Rico Stevens on the topic of a review of the economic literature related to concentrated benefits and dispersed costs. Congratulations. Please join us in congratulating all our Mannkal scholars on their achievements.
Photo opportunities. Sorry.
It's now time to announce the winner of another very special award. Every year, Mannkal selects a John Hyde Scholar, named after one of Mankhal's most valued advisors. Perhaps we should rename this award the John Hyde OAM Scholar, as Mr. Hyde was honoured on Australia Day with a Medal of the Order of Australia. It was wonderful to see that his valuable work was finally recognised, although at Mannkal his public policy contributions have long been acknowledged. Mr. Hyde served as a director at Mannkal for 21 years from Mankhal's establishment in 1997. Throughout the year, our 2022 John Hyde Scholar was an enthusiastic participant in the scholarship program, always participating in events and asking earnest questions. Over the course of the year, this scholar had a number of articles published in The Spectator and other publications, and more recently had 2 more articles published by their internship hosts. This scholar fulfilled all the requirements of their scholarship, submitting reports and videos well before their due dates. On their return from their internship, we observed a real blossoming of personal confidence when this scholar presented a summary for their peers and Mannkal staff and ambassadors. A truly outstanding performance across the entire scholarship year. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to announce that the John Hyde Scholar for 2022 is Frances Ann. We will now have a few short words from the man who makes all this possible, our chairman, Mr. Ron Manners.
Fellas, you can see why I go to work. What a fantastic team. I'm so lucky to work with people like you guys and meet up with young people like this. Yes, I used to be a pessimist, but now I'm an optimist. Listen, it's an easy task being asked to give you a few words, but in the back of my mind there's a far more challenging task that's worrying me, and next month I've got to visit 3 European capital cities and explain to them how Australia has got it absolutely right with all our policies and everything is perfect in Australia. Now, from a distance, that's how it looks. I'll try to remember rule number 1, of course, which is never to disparage your home country from a distance. But from Europe, Australia's very difficult to understand. They watch on and they see how Russia is blowing up the power stations in Ukraine. And then they look at Australia where we are blowing up our own very useful power stations. And they can't understand it. They can't work out what's wrong with us. So that will be my task, to tell them how we've got everything right. Anyway, one of the problems is that, to me, I think that we're sort of caught up in the midst of a never-ending series of crises. Some people call it a polycrisis. Some of the crises are real and some are totally imaginary, but they clutter up our lives to the point where many of us are sort of starting to live in fear. In a country like this, we've got people living in fear. I know that if we familiarise ourselves with all these multiple crises, we'll be so busy that we won't get any work done. Now, I wonder how adversely all these multiple crises affect Australia's productivity. Let me list a few of these things that you're very familiar with. They're the ones called the so-called climate crisis. There's the extinction crisis, diversity, ESG, sustainability, corporate social responsibility, victimhood, poverty, the world of woke with a capital W, and trying to follow the endless changes in our regulations, our taxation, our superannuation, the franking credits, and the current attempt to modify our constitution with the voice. Who is to blame for us losing our traditional Australian self-confidence? Now, who is to blame? How many of you have heard of Antonio Gramsci? 4, 5, 6. 6 out of 100, 6.5 is not. That's not too good, is it? Now, I wonder. I never met Gramsci. He was the master Marxist strategist. He died a year after I was born, so I didn't get around to meeting him. But he was far smarter than our own political and business leaders in that, without us even knowing, he left so many seeds of destruction in our culture. We may never recover from what he called his long march through our institutions. Gramsci said, "Socialism is precisely the legend that must overwhelm Christianity in the new world order. Socialism will triumph first by capturing the culture via infiltration of schools, universities, churches, and the media, by transforming the consciousness of society." He also said every revolution has to be preceded by an intense work of cultural penetration, that is to say, of new ideas that permeate through human aggregates. Now, Gramsci understood that the power of dominant classes is not only sustained by force, but also through the control of the education system, religion, and the media. He understood that culture is the main battlefield of political strategy. Our Mannkal Foundation is planning a major conference in Fremantle early next year, already planned, to examine the outcome and causes of our deteriorating national culture and ways of breaking that spell and perhaps reclaiming Australia. More details to follow. How can we restore some rational discourse? What can we do in our own lives, in our own families and communities to restore the rational discourse of Western civilization that has contributed so much to Australia? You may identify many people in public life who are marching to the beat of Gramsci's drum, and many of them even are unaware of his master plan. Fortunately, there are a few leaders emerging who can effectively restore our confidence, and we were fortunate to hear from one such leader tonight in Senator Jacinta Price. She understands what it is to lead by example. Jacinta reminded us of what a great country we have, and I was reminded of that also when noted international economist Dr. Per Bylund announced this week his comprehensive analytical tool called the International Work Migration Index. Sounds terrifying, but the study focuses on the bureaucratic procedure and the time it takes to lawfully move from one country to another country to start a new life. It's a guide to those seeking to take that crucial step in their lives, and it's a warning to some countries that suffer from having erected too high a barrier that causes them to miss out on the hard work, creativity and prosperity that carefully selected new arrivals could bring. Byland reminds us that people flee from war, they flee from poverty, and they flee from oppression. But they not only flee from something, they also migrate to something. And that something is what Australians should be focusing on and feeling proud about. Now, we got, how are we going for time? Okay, this is the long version. So we put out the long version in the monthly newsletter that goes out. But I'd just come back to the prime purpose of our being, and that's the student program, opening the minds of the next generation. You've seen the examples tonight. I don't have to say anything about that because you've seen the examples tonight. And they go to other countries. They learn by travel that other countries, to our surprise, do some things better than we do. We don't read about that too much here, but they do. One of the things was the COVID pandemic response. We didn't start very well. I was lucky enough to go to a conference overseas called Rising from the Crisis, where we compared how different countries were responding to the pandemic. It was right in the middle of the pandemic. I had a hell of a trouble getting out of Australia and more trouble getting back into Australia. I was the only one of the 370 delegates that had trouble attending the conference and getting back into their own home countries. The only one. Anyway, after considerable pressure, I see there has been an official inquiry announced from the state government. They've announced the purpose of the inquiry into the aspects of the pandemic response is that we, the citizens, now need to know why we were forced to surrender liberties and what we received in return. That's so we can stop making the same mistakes next time. 3 commissioners have been appointed. Anyway, I'll be putting in a submission. I've written it already. It's got to be in by Wednesday next week. It's pretty polite. But if I could sum, my experience was excruciating. Why I had to do my quarantine in Adelaide, can anyone tell me why? I don't know. It didn't make any sense. Madness. We trucked in on a coach from the airport, a coach full of strangers. Fortunately, one of us was smart enough to get our contacts together and make a WhatsApp group, so that we could communicate with each other how extremely bad we were treated in 2 weeks of that gulag. And anyway, my submission is pretty long. It's pretty detailed. It's very polite, but it could be summarised in the form of a question. I'll put it like this. Is it the legitimate role of a state government to treat their citizens like dog turds? I'll present the report by next Wednesday. Another concern of mine is that investigative journalism appears to have gone into retreat since the 1980 days when we had WA Incorporated. It was covered by the media vigorously pointing out how the state government had got completely out of control. Late last year, when it was announced that we were having a WA Incorporated Mark II come on the scene, not a mention in the media. I've had to mention it myself, so look at the manwest.com website to see my comments on that. It'll bounce back. It will end just as badly as WA Incorporated Mark I. We got a couple of interesting, unexpected side benefits from our Mannkal scholarship. That was what we were started, but out of that has come the wonderful Mannkal alumni, where they communicate with each other. There's about 2,000 of them, and they're in touch with us. They communicate. They help each other around the world. When somebody goes somewhere, inevitably there's a Mannkal scholar somewhere. They can take them by the hand and lead them on. So that's one of the surprising things. The other one was the emergence of our Mannkal ambassadors. Happened just by accident. A few people, and there's many of them here tonight, they sort of said, Ron, we like what you're doing. What can we do to help? We said, well, it's going to cost you $1,000 a year or equivalent help in kind, and you're going to be our ambassadors. They've emerged into this wonderful mentoring group to the young scholars, and it's just fascinating to see how mentoring has taken off and how beneficial it is. I guess many of us here have had mentors that have helped us. I've been lucky. I've had 3. I met the first mentor I met when I was 17. He was 10 years older. I met him in Bullfinch near Southern Cross, under a tree somewhere. He went on to become Sir Avi Parbo, and probably the most influential business person in Australia in the second half of last century. He was a refugee from war-torn Estonia. He graduated in Adelaide from the university in mining engineering and ended up in Bullfinch, West Australia. Well, we maintained a wonderful friendship right through till his death in 2017, I think. And I must say that he used to give me wonderful advice, and I can remember asking him once, Avi, what was your first impression? And I'll mention this quickly because it does apply to all the students. Where you come you graduate, you come out of university, what's your first impression? That was my question of Avi. What was your first impression when you graduated and entered the rough and tumble workforce? His answer was, I had optimistically thought that the world out there would be ready to help me develop my vision and my career. I quickly found that some people would assist me while others would hinder such dreams. That was my first confrontation with the reality. But today, he said, he was talking to me about 2000, so about 23 years ago. Today, it's far worse. And he continued, he said, today when you do something, you know that from the first day, probably half of the country is working against you in some way or another. You will have departments in favour of what you're doing and probably an even number of departments very much against it. They will want to hem you in and stop you from what you're doing, or at the very least make sure that you can only do it in a very restricted manner. Harvey said, what Australia desperately needs is less compliance and more performance. It's 20 years ago. It's probably far worse today. Anyway, one of our ambassadors, Dr. Ross Varden, described today's business world in these words about 2 weeks ago. He said, from the surface, it looks like a normal world, but underneath are all the white ants and termites going their hardest, and they are ever powerful. So let me stress the importance of a mentoring role, because you never know. That a little bit of advice in the early stages might stop you from banging your heads against a brick wall as you travel through life. So now conclude with the formalities tonight. Let me draw your attention to our wonderful team, our CEO, Nicola Wright, our scholarships manager, Kate Wagstaff, our company secretary, Judy Carroll, Nathan Cuthbertson, Matthew Locke, Stuart Banks, Jeannie Moreland, Chief Ambassador Russell Reek, and all the ambassadors, our guest lecturers, plus all our board members. Please, could you all come up on the stage with all the scholars, present and past, because we want to have a fabulous group photo of all of you up on the stage. The rest of you, please get on with the drinking, and we're going to join you. And most of all, thank you all for coming and joining us tonight. Thank you.